Turning to the Secretary General's report, I would like to express my grave concern over the ongoing escalation across the Middle East and convey my sincere condolences to the victims of the hostilities and express hope that diplomacy and peace will prevail. I also would like to acknowledge the presence of High Representative Mladenov and the progress made on the implementation of the UN Security Council Resolution 2803. The ceasefire must be upheld and consolidated through the full implementation of all elements of the resolution, including deployment of international stabilization force, disarmament of Hamas and other armed fractions in Gaza, and the handover of the governance responsibility to the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. The United Nations is engaged with all parties, maintains a strong field presence, and stands ready to assist in moving forward from humanitarian assistance towards recovery, reconstruction, and viable political horizon. Mr. President, today's briefing is devoted to the 37th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of the Security Council Resolution 2334 of the year 2016, and it covers the period from 3rd December 2025 to 13 March 2026. Security Council Resolution 2334 calls on Israel to immediately and completely cease all settlement activity in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, and to fully respect all of its legal obligations in this regard. Settlement activity has nevertheless continued at high levels. During the reporting period, Israeli planning authorities advanced and approved over 6,000 units in the occupied West Bank, including approximately 3,160 housing units in the Area C and 2,850 housing units in East Jerusalem. The Israeli Housing Ministry published tenders for 5,375 housing units in Area C, out of which 3,401 are located in the Area E1. On the 8th February, Israeli cabinet approved a series of measures that would expand Israeli civil authority in the occupied West Bank and further consolidate Israeli planning, enforcement, and administrative control, including in parts of Area A and B. These measures include transfer of Hebrew municipal authorities, such as construction permits in the Ibrahimi Mosque, Tomb of Patriarchs, to Israeli authorities. The measures, which mostly require implementation via military orders, would also remove regulatory barriers on land acquisition and construction by Israelis and purport to shift certain authorities from the Palestinian Authority to the Israeli civil administration. On 15 February, the Israeli government approved a plan to resume land registration process in Area C of the occupied West Bank and allocated some 244 million shekels, approximately $78 million for this purpose. Demolitions and seizures of Palestinian-owned structures also accelerated, citing the lack of Israeli-issued building permits, which are almost impossible for Palestinians to obtain. Israeli authorities seized or forced people to demolish 429 structures in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, displacing 575 persons, including 290 children and 150 women. 28 of these structures were donor-funded. Evictions of Palestinians from their homes in occupied East Jerusalem also continued. On 4th January, the Israeli police forcibly evicted 2 Palestinian families from their apartments in Baton al-Haba area of Silvan in the occupied East Jerusalem, displacing 8 people. Settlers took over the building shortly after. This is the 6th eviction incident in Baton al-Haba since February 2024. On 10 February 2026, Israeli authorities issued eviction notices against 11 Palestinian families in the same neighborhood, affecting approximately 80 individuals, including children. Mr. President, Security Council Resolution 2334 calls for an immediate steps to prevent all acts of violence against civilians, including acts of terror, as well as acts of provocation and destruction. Acts of violence against civilians continued with high numbers of fatal incidents, precluding from detailing all. The ceasefire in Gaza remained highly fragile since The ceasefire in Gaza remains highly fragile as Israel Defense Force military operations continued with airstrikes, sailing and gunfire across the Strip, including in the vicinity of so-called Yellow Line, while Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups engaged in armed exchanges with IDF personnel. During the reporting period, according to the Gaza Ministry of Health, 292 Palestinians were killed in IDF airstrikes, shelling and gunfire in Gaza, and 1,741 were injured. A total of 651 Palestinians were killed since the ceasefire went into effect. On 30th and 31st January, IDF carried out a series of airstrikes across Gaza, killing 33 Palestinians, including 7 women and 7 children. The IDF said it targeted Hamas and Islamic Jihad commanders and sites throughout Gaza after 8 militants emerged from a tunnel in Rafah on 30th January. 3 of them were killed and 1 captured. Meanwhile, the high levels of violence in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, continued at an alarming rate. Overall, in the occupied West Bank, 32 Palestinians, including 7 children, were killed during large-scale Israeli security forces operations, armed exchanges, settler attacks, and other incidents. 833 Palestinians, including 138 children, were injured, including 178 by Israeli security forces due to tear gas inhalation, and 141 by live ammunition, and 322 by Israeli settlers and other civilians. According to the Israeli sources, 2 Israeli civilians, including 1 woman, were killed by armed Palestinians, and another 49 Israelis, including 5 children and 5 women, and 4 Israeli security forces personnel were injured by Palestinians in shooting, stabbing, and ramming attacks and other incidents. The Israeli security forces arrested more than 1,600 Palestinians during raids and operations in the occupied West Bank. Israel currently holds at least 9,245 Palestinians, 3,358 of whom are in administrative detention. On 1st February, Israeli forces extended a military order designating Jenin, Tulkaram, and Nur Shams refugee camps and surrounding areas closed military zones until 31st March, prohibiting access without military issued permits, extending the ongoing displacement of some 33,000 of their residents, while continuing with the extensive destruction of homes and infrastructure in the camps. Daily settler-related attacks escalated, often in the presence of Israeli forces, resulting in casualty, property damage, and displacement in Palestinian communities across the occupied West Bank. On 16 December, an Israeli settler reportedly shot and killed an 18-year-old Palestinian near Tuku, Bethlehem, during the funeral procession for a 16-year-old Palestinian boy shot and killed by Israeli forces on 15 December. On 26 January, following repeated attacks and threats by Israeli settlers from 4 surrounding settlement outposts, the remaining 100 residents of Ras Ain al-Auja Bedouin community were forced to leave their community. This follows the forced displacement of 98 Palestinian households comprising 485 people on 8 and 19 January. On 27 January, around 100 Israeli settlers raided 4 communities in Masafer Yatta, south of Hebron, injuring 6 Palestinians, including 2 women and 1 child. Subsequently, on 7th March, an Israeli settler shot and killed a 27-year-old Palestinian man in Masafer Yatta, reportedly during an altercation after settlers trespassed near Palestinian homes in Area B. Including this incident between 2nd and 8th March, 6 Palestinians were killed in settler violence. Palestinian attacks against Israelis continued both in the occupied West Bank and Israel. On 26 December, a Palestinian man killed 2 Israelis, including a woman, and injured another 2, including 1 boy, in ramming and stabbing attacks near the Israeli cities of Bet Shea and Afula. During the holy month of Ramadan, as in the previous years, the Israeli authorities imposed restrictions on Palestinians from the West Bank visiting Al-Aqsa compound, limiting the number of additional permits issued for worshippers entering Jerusalem for Friday prayers, and allowing access only for certain age and gender categories. From 28 February, as part of broader security measures and limits on gathering imposed due to military escalation in the Middle East, Israeli authorities severely restricted access to Jerusalem Old City, including to the holy sites. Mr. President, the Security Council in its Resolution 2334 calls upon both parties to refrain from provocative actions, incitement, and inflammatory rhetoric. Unfortunately, such acts continued. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad continued to praise terror attacks and to call for additional violence against the Israelis. A senior Fatah official called Israel neo-Nazis, while another said Israel is doomed to perish. Israeli ministers and members of the Knesset continued to call for the reestablishment of settlements in Gaza, the annexation of the West Bank, and the immigration of Palestinians from OPT, and for the continuing to kill the idea of Palestinian state. On 20th February, an Israeli Knesset member alongside dozens of activists crossed into the Gaza Strip, stating Gaza will always be ours. On 20th January, a Jerusalem municipal official expressed hope that Israel would throw out and annihilate all UNRWA personnel shortly after the UNRWA Sheikh Jarrah compound was seized and almost completely demolished by Israeli authorities in complete disregard of the legal framework applicable to these inviolable premises of the United Nations. On 25th January, the compound was set alight by unknown assailants. The Secretary General brought this issue to the attention of the President of the General Assembly and of the President of the Security Council on 28 January of 2026. Mr. President, Resolution 2334 reiterated calls by Middle East Quartet for affirmative steps to be taken immediately to reverse negative trends on the ground that are imperiling the two-state solution. On 24 January, President Abbas issued a decree amending the local elections law to require candidates to commit to the PLO as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people and to its program. On 2nd February, he issued a decree authorizing direct elections to the Palestinian National Council on 1st November 2026. On 13 February, the Palestinian Authority published the draft interim constitution of the State of Palestine for a 60-day public review period. Following a request from the Central Electoral Commission, the United Nations deployed an electoral needs assessment mission from 16 to 24 February. Israel continued its unilateral withholding of Palestinian clearance revenues. The PA estimates that Israel is currently withholding more than 8 billion new Israeli shekels, deepening the PA fiscal crisis. Corresponding banking agreements essential for the Palestinian economy continue to be renewed on short-term basis, with most recent extensions set to expire on 28 March. In Gaza, about 1.4 million people remain displaced across 1,200 sites, many in overcrowded and unsafe conditions. Since the start of the military escalation in the Middle East, and as of mid-March, only limited fuel and humanitarian aid have entered Gaza for Kerem Shalom. On 30th December, Israel announced that it plans to suspend the operations of some international NGOs. The government also notified 37 NGOs that their registration would expire at the end of 2025. On 27 February, Israel High Court of Justice issued a temporary injunction blocking the registrations. Mr. President, in Resolution 2334, Security Council called upon all states to distinguish in their relevant dealings between the territory of Israel and the territories occupied since 1967. Resolution 2334 also called upon all parties to continue inter alia to exert collective efforts to launch credible negotiations on all final status issue in the Middle East peace process. On 14 January, the United States announced the start of the Phase 2 of the Comprehensive Plan to End Gaza Conflict, endorsed by the Security Council Resolution 2803. On 16 January, the United States announced the formation of a transitional Palestinian government for Gaza, the National Committee for Administration of Gaza, NCAG, as well as the appointment of the High Representative for Gaza. The committee convened in Cairo on 16 January and continued its preparation to assume transitional governance responsibility. The Board of Peace held meetings on 22nd January and 19 February, during which member states pledged some $17 billion towards the reconstruction of Gaza. On 20 February, a liaison office was established between the Office of High Representative and the Palestinian Authority. On 1st February, Israel reopened the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt, allowing limited pedestrian movement in and out of the Strip. To the date, 848 people have left Gaza through Rafah, while 844 have returned. Following the military escalation in the Middle East on 28 February, the crossing was closed, reopening on 19 March. Mr. President, in closing, allow me to share the Secretary General's observations on implementation of the Security Council Resolution 2334 in the occupied Palestinian territory of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. First, Israeli settlements expansion continues at rapid pace alongside the proliferation of outposts and steps promoting the annexation of the West Bank. I condemn the relentless Israeli settlement expansion in the West Bank, which continues to fuel tensions, impede access by the Palestinians to their land, and threaten the viability of a fully independent and contiguous Palestinian state. The rapidly expanding settlement footprint, including the expansion of settlement outposts, is taking place in conjunction with a rise in settler-related attacks. These developments are in breach of international law, further entrenching the unlawful Israeli occupation and undermining the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. I reiterate that all Israeli settlements and related infrastructure have no legal validity and are in flagrant violation of international law, including applicable UN resolutions, recalling in this regard the findings by the International Court of Justice in its advisory opinion of 19 July 2024, which affirmed inter alia that the State of Israel is under an obligation to bring to an end its unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territory as rapidly as possible. The government of Israel must abide by its obligation and international law. These unilateral Israeli steps steadily transform the landscape. I am deeply concerned by the government's decision to deepen Israeli administrative and territorial control of the West Bank. These measures are likely to increase Israeli control over the land and continue to settlement expansion and could lead to the dispossession of Palestinians of their property. They would also further undermine the Palestinian Authority, contravene existing agreements, breach relevant obligations under international law, and risk further destabilizing the situation on the ground, as well as seriously erode the prospects of a negotiated two-state solution. In addition to the settlement activities, Palestinians face displacement, demolitions, evictions, and crippling movement and access restrictions that stifle the economy and severely limit access to employment, hospitals, schools, and agricultural land. The residents continue to be denied the right to return home. The demolition and seizure of Palestinian structures entails numerous human rights violations and raise concerns about the risk of forcible transfer. I call on Israel to cease the demolition of Palestinian-owned structures in accordance with its international obligations. I also note with deep concern the recent report of the High Commissioner for Human Rights detailing Israel's discriminatory administration of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, with evidence-based finding on entrenched racial discrimination. The heightened level of violence in the West Bank is deeply alarming. I condemn all acts of violence against civilians. I am deeply concerned that persistent and intensifying settler attacks, sometimes in the proximity and with the support of Israeli security forces, are further displacing Palestinian communities. I call on Israel, as the occupying power, to protect the Palestinian population against attacks and intimidation. Palestinian attacks against Israelis must also cease. All perpetrators of violent attacks must be held accountable. I remain concerned about large numbers of Palestinians, including children, held by Israel, including in administrative detention without charge or trial. Reports of torture, ill treatment, including sexual violence, and deaths in custody are deeply disturbing. Israel must use detention as last resort, prevent ill treatment, and end administrative detention of all children. All detainees must be treated humanely, and those arbitrarily detained must be released. I am disturbed by multiple instances in which officials on all sides have glorified violence and engaged in dangerous provocations, incitement, and inflammatory language, which must be rejected by all. Israel's implementation of punitive economic and fiscal measures is destabilizing Palestinian institutions and threatening the viability of Palestinian Authority. I urge Israel to immediately cease all such unilateral steps. I encourage continued reforms by the Palestinian Authority and urge international partners to provide necessary support to this effort. I welcome ongoing electoral preparations, which are key to the reform processes. I reiterate my call to parties to respect and uphold the status quo at the holy sites in Jerusalem, in taking into account the special and historic role of Jordan. The launch of Phase 2 of the comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict, including the establishment of the National Committee for Administration of Gaza, is an important step. It is critical that all parties fully abide by their commitments so that recovery can proceed in Gaza while advancing a credible political horizon towards a two-state solution. In coordination with the Palestinian Authority, the UN stands ready to support the committee's effort to provide critical public services, facilitate humanitarian aid, and lay the groundwork for reconstruction. I welcome the recovery of the body of the last hostage in Gaza. I am deeply relieved that all hostages have been reunited with their families or brought home for burial. All, as released hostages, continue to publicly share chilling details of their captivity, including accounts of sexual violence. I again strongly condemn the abhorrent terror attack by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups of 7 October 2023 and their prolonged holding of hostages in inhumane conditions. I condemn the continued killings and injury of civilians in Gaza, including women and children. Despite of the ceasefire, Israeli airstrike, exchanges of gunfire between both sides, and shelling, particularly near the so-called Yellow Line, and attacks on the civilians attempting to return home or access land, have resulted in further loss of life. I condemn the continued destruction by the Israeli security forces of large areas in Gaza Strip. Such incidents must immediately cease. The protection of civilians is paramount in any armed conflict. Parties to conflict have an obligation to respect international humanitarian law. I am deeply concerned by the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. While food security has improved due to increased aid and commercial deliveries, infrastructure damage is catastrophic, and there are severe shortages of clean water, medical care, and shelter. Humanitarian access remains restricted, with aid convoys facing logistical and security obstacles. I call on all parties to comply with their obligations under international humanitarian law, including to facilitate the full, rapid, and unimpeded passage of humanitarian assistance. I strongly condemn the Israeli authorities' continued steps against UNRWA. These actions are inconsistent with Israel's clear obligations under international law. I again urge the government of Israel to immediately return and restore the UNRWA Sheikh Jarrah compound and our UNRWA premises to the United Nations without delay, along with any assets seized from them. I welcome the advisory opinion issued by the International Court of Justice on 22nd October, which reaffirmed several fundamental obligations of Israel under international law, such as obligation to cooperate with the United Nations, including UNRWA. I urge member states to continue politically support and financially sustain UNRWA. I remain committed to supporting Palestinians and Israelis in ending the unlawful occupation and resolving the conflict in line with international law, UN resolution, bilateral agreements, pursuing a two-state solution. Israel and a fully independent, democratic, contiguous, viable, sovereign Palestinian state, including both Gaza and the West Bank, leading side by side in peace and security, based on pre-1967 lines, with Jerusalem as the capital of both states. Mr. President, I thank you for your attention. This ends the presentation of the Secretary General's report. Thank you very much.